Welcome everybody. We're going to get started on our first scenario of our opioid crisis use case. In this scenario, 38-year-old Stella is presenting to the emergency department experiencing an overdose. And over the next 20 minutes, we're going to walk you through her journey of treatment, stabilization, consultation for potential substance use disorder, as well as her road to recovery. And you're going to hear from Epic, NIC, FormFast, American Well, and NetSmart as we capitalize on interoperability to support Stella's care. But first, let's get started with Stella in the ED and Epic.
Thank you. So Epic's playing the role as the emergency room physician in this scenario, and Stella presented with a few symptoms: acute respiratory distress, altered mental status, and meiosis. When she also checked in, we were able to retrieve her medication history through what's called a PDMP query. And going through that, we see a history of some opioids. Because of that, we think that she might be an opioid overdose and administers some Narcan, which she responds favorably to. Let's go back and I'll turn it over to Jeff to kind of describe how we got that medication history through that PDMP query.
Thanks. One of the really critical elements in the fight against the opioid epidemic is to ensure that the PDMP system not only runs effectively, but it's also transparent with that data. So what we're looking at in this particular scenario is the actual platform itself. And one of the first things I wanted to do was actually understand what Dr. Masood's prescribing habits have been like. A quick search reveals not only information about where he's practicing and his specialty, it's actually also giving us a summary of what his interaction has been like with the prescription drug monitoring system. In this case, we can see that query that hit our system from Dr. Masood about this patient, Stella, and I also see where it came from and the type of system that was used. Similarly, I can look at a more deep level at overall utilization trends that are happening across our state or that organization that Epic is operating out of. I can start to understand, for example, compliance scores over any given window of time. And if I wanted to understand, too, from a prescriber insights perspective, how Dr. Masood prescribed those controlled substances, I would have that insight here. Lastly, if I wanted to actually understand what was happening with Stella as a patient, I can pull up her dispense history and interrogate some of that data. I see a list of all of the different identities that have been merged, and similarly, I can see the types of relationships she's having with pharmacies and other prescribers, in addition to all of the dispense details that correlate to her as a patient. With that, I'll go ahead and hand it back to our colleague at Epic.
Thank you. So based on everything we've seen so far, like I said, we conclude that Stella has opioid overdosed, which we put on our problem list. When we put that, the ICD-10 code associated with opioid overdose is reportable to the state, which comes into play in stage 2 of this scenario when we trigger the EICR message. From the opioid overdose, we decided to do a couple orders, toxicology as well as a referral to a psychiatric consult. And when we make that psychiatric consult, we actually need some further authorization from Stella. So when we make that order, a message goes to FormFast to get that authorization, which I'll now turn over to them to explain that.
Thanks. So now that Dr. Masood has ordered the behavioral health telehealth consult, we need to go ahead and get Stella's informed consent to have the consultation. Using FormFast Go on my tablet at bedside, I can scan Stella's barcode that is on her wristband. And because we received an ORM message from Epic, it goes ahead and pops up the telehealth consult consent forms. So I'm going to launch those, and you'll see that Stella's information pre-populates in the upper right-hand corner there. This form allows me to choose the ordering and the rendering provider, so I'll select those. And the form also allows me to indicate via checkboxes that I covered each part of this process with her and that she had the opportunity to ask questions. So once all of Stella's questions are answered, she goes ahead and clicks the signature box to enlarge it. You're going to see this signature box is outlined in red. That means that this field is required to be completed before I can submit the form. Stella signs the form, and the ED nurse also witnesses the signature. And if Dr. Masood is in the room, he can sign too. If he's not in the room, we can pen this form for his later signature, and he can sign when he has the opportunity. So when I submit this form, it gets sent over to Epic via HL7 MDM message, and it's available to our entire care team should they need it in the future. And with this consent completed, I'm able to turn it over to Webster at American Well for her telehealth consult.
Thank you. So now that we've received Stella's consent for the telemedicine consult, we'll go ahead and use the American Well telemedicine card to bring Stella face-to-face with the provider. The reason we're doing this is that when Stella arrived in the emergency department, there was not a psychiatrist available there. Therefore, we have two options. One is to admit Stella to the hospital to take up a bed and wait for a psychiatrist to arrive. The other is to transport Stella to another location where there is a psychiatrist physically available there, both of which would incur some unnecessary costs and some wait times, so we can avoid that by bringing Stella face-to-face with a psychiatrist using video. So I will walk you through that workflow using the cart here to my left. On the screen, you can see the first part of our intake process, which is just some basic information about Stella, her name and her MRN number, both of which I'll skip to take up less time. The next screen shows the ability for us to select a provider type. On the screen here, you see a behavioral healthcare consult. We could have a number of different programs here available, such as telestroke or pediatrics, depending on what the hospital system has set up as their telemedicine programs. But I will select the behavioral healthcare consult to route that case to the necessary providers. The next screen allows us to add additional details, such as the environment that Stella's in, her current disposition, any other information that would be helpful for the remote clinician to know before he or she connects with Stella over video. The next screen is going to present me with two options to select a provider. The first one is to see first available. If more than one provider is on call right now, we could route that case to them and the first available would pick it up and take the call with Stella. For our scenario, we are going to choose a specific provider, which will allow us to assign Stella to one doctor. I can see on screen now that Charles Roberts is the psychiatrist who's on call and available now. I'm going to go ahead and select him. And before I start the visit, I'll just explain what's going to happen. Stella is going to enter the virtual waiting room, and from there she'll stay until Dr. Roberts picks up the case from the EMR. I'm going to hand it over to NetSmart. American Well and NetSmart have worked very closely together to embed the American Well interface, provider-to-provider experience, into the NetSmart electronic health record so that they can do documentation from one place. So I'll hand it over now.
Thank you. Hello, I'm Kevin with NetSmart, representing Dr. Roberts here in this scenario. So as Webster indicated, what you see here on the left is my behavioral health EHR. So when NetSmart and American Well partnered, what we did was we took their provider platform and we embedded it within the EHR. As you can see here, what that means is now I have a pop-up notification indicating that a patient has entered my virtual waiting room. In addition to that, I can also receive an SMS text indicating that a patient is in my waiting room. When I'm ready for the session to begin, I can select to connect here within the waiting room, and a video launcher will present itself. Once the video launcher does present itself, I'm going to maneuver these two pop-ups to be dual screen. So what that does is allows me to do any documentation on my left and have the video session here on my right. So I'm going to move the video session here to my right, and then have the EHR on my left for any documentation to take place. So here we have dual screen, and with the video session on my right, a nice feature from a provider's perspective is this pan-tilt-Z camera. So from here, on the provider side, I can choose to where and directionalize this camera should be going. So that allows me to zoom in, zoom out, left and right to get a better sense of the surroundings that Stella's currently in. So if she's in the ED, I can get a sense for what other staff members are there with her. If she's at home, in a different example, I can get a sense for her home surroundings and anything that might provide better context for our encounter. So as this session begins, since this is going to be the first time Stella and I have met, I'm going to quickly add her in a pre-admission episode, in a pre-admission state, and then I can go and move into my initial psychiatric evaluation. Here is I can take in some initial presenting problems, family health history, that type of information for us to become familiar with each other. For this scenario, after the initial psychiatric evaluation, Stella and I are both going to mutually agree that it's best if she actually comes into one of our physical facilities for an MAT program. I'm going to then transition from her to the ED staff member to communicate that we would like Stella to be referred to one of our sites and for them to send over an electronic message so I can actually process the referral. So I can show you that and how that's going to work once I end this visit. And then I'm going to maximize my EHR here. I'm going to go into my Care Connect inbox. So the Care Connect inbox is a web application within the EHR that allows for me as a provider, or if I were another staff member, to receive and send messages externally, all secure. But I can also use it for internal messaging amongst other care team members or other staff members. So here you can see a referral sent from the ED staff that has Stella Shea's CCD. So the CCD contains some demographic information, active problems, medications, encounters, a type of summary of care, if you will, for to give me some context into what just happened with Stella at the ED. So for this document, I'm going to go ahead and manage it, and I'm going to choose the already existing Stella in my EHR that came over from the pre-admission. And I'm going to admit her as an existing client. So what this is going to do is direct me into our admission process, where I can take her from a pre-admission state into an actual admission state into the MAT program. So I'm going to select to add her into another program. And here I can give it a date, time, give her a provider to meet with, but then also get her into that program. I want to make note of the demographics field. So we actually are able to parse out and populate these fields automatically from the document itself. So what this does is eliminate more clicks and typing by the intake staff to help streamline the admission process. Now once I submit this form, the admission form here, the document itself that I managed is going to do two things. One, it's going to populate into Stella's chart within the EHR. That will allow myself or other care team members to refer back to and get that context of that summary of care document for what took place at the ED. The second thing it's going to do is it's going to parse in the problems, allergies, and medications that were on that CCD. So here in our clinical reconciliation process, you can see the ones that are highlighted in yellow actually came over on the CCD itself. And if there were any other pre-existing or other problems that we had documented within the EHR, those will show up as non-highlighted. What that does is allows me to determine what is already documented and what I potentially need to document within the EHR. So what I'm doing here is proving the ability to accept external data that originated in another source and ingest it and associate it to Stella within the EHR. Once the clinical reconciliation is complete, I can go back into my Care Connect inbox and I can send a referral response. This can be an automated response or a custom response. It's optional. Basically just telling the ED staff that the referral was accepted and she and Stella will be seen at our facilities. So I'm going to go ahead and send an automated response saying that the referral was accepted, and then the referral will go into my accepted folder within the inbox. So that was showing how direct messaging can be used to quickly communicate with other healthcare providers using a different system, but also incorporating their data and incorporating it into our EHR. I want to pivot quick back to telehealth and what we showed here, proving and showing the advantages of telehealth by taking a care team member within his or her four walls, so I was in my office or my home, and extending that outreach to an ED quickly and in a timely manner. I want to make note of this heat map here put on by the Washington State Department of Health, which is an opioid overdose heat map. So another nice advantage of telehealth is its natural mobility. So putting a telehealth tablet, not the whole card itself, but just the tablet, into a mobile crisis van or other type of mobile unit to extend the outreach of a provider to these areas of patients in need. Now, these patients may not always have the ability or the means to transport themselves from where they are located into a physical site to get the care that they need from someone like a psychiatrist or a substance abuse provider. So another nice advantage of telehealth is being able to mobilize it and getting in front of these patients before it's too late. So to summarize, what we just covered was how taking accessible data between different care team members utilizing different EHRs can be used to benefit and advance the care of a patient, that being Stella in this example. As we move on to session number 2, they will talk about the opioid crisis from a population health standpoint and what they are doing to make better informed decisions and educating individuals.